Welcome to another deep dive. We've got something really interesting to dig into today.
Yeah.
A talk about finding hope when things feel hopeless. It's all centered around the story of Joseph from the book of Genesis. I think this one is going to resonate with a lot of you, especially,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
right now.
Especially right now.
I mean, good one.
Yeah. So set the stage for us.
Yeah.
What's the speaker's approach here?
Well, they use this really familiar story, right? I mean, everybody knows Joseph,
Yeah.
at least a little bit. But they use it in this really clever way, almost like a blueprint for navigating tough times and coming out stronger, like how to handle it.
I am here for that. I'm a sucker for a good story.
Ah,
But, a lot of people might only know the very, very basic outline of Joseph's life.
yeah.
Like, hit the highlights. What happened to this guy?
Okay, so Joseph was one of 12 brothers
Okay.
and his father's favorite. So already,
A little tension there.
yeah, there's some sibling rivalry going on. But then Joseph starts having these vivid dreams.
That suggests he's going to be ruling over his family one day. And, not going to go over well.
His brothers are not thrilled.
Yeah, putting it mildly. I mean, they end up selling him into slavery.
That's right.
Gets taken to Egypt. What a plot twist.
Huge.
But the speaker doesn't just dwell on the dramatic events. They really emphasize
Yeah.
the emotional impact of what Joseph went through.
The psychological trauma, really? Imagine
so.
being betrayed by your family,
Yeah.
ripped from everything you know, sold into a foreign land. I mean,
Yeah.
the speaker points out that Joseph probably felt abandoned,
Right.
alone, full of despair. It's really important to acknowledge that even though his story has a happy ending, those years were likely incredibly traumatic.
Yeah, that makes it so relatable, right? I mean,
mean-
we've all felt betrayed or experienced situations that just felt so deeply unfair. And the speaker actually pulls in
Yes,
Psalm 105.
that's right. To remind us that even when it seems like things are happening randomly, there could be a bigger picture unfolding. I love that.
It's like, hey, you might not see it now,
Yeah,
but even this painful experience, this awful thing you're going through,
right.
could be part of a larger plan. We don't know.
Yeah, and I like that it's not about, toxic positivity or pretending everything's fine.
No.
It's more about holding on to that little sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end of the story.
Exactly. And the speaker takes this idea even further. They introduce this concept that Joseph's time as a slave
Okay,
wasn't just a period of suffering,
okay.
but active preparation
Interesting.
for his future role.
So instead of just passively enduring this hardship,
Right.
those years were actually shaping him for something greater. It's almost like what?
Yeah.
Like an apprenticeship for leadership?
Exactly, an apprenticeship. And this is where the speaker starts drawing these parallels to our own lives.
Yeah.
They ask us to think about the challenges that we're facing right now.
Yeah.
Like, what skills are we developing even if our current situation feels unpleasant? What lessons are we learning that might be valuable later on?
So for example, with Joseph, he had to learn to navigate a completely different culture.
Right.
A new language, probably developed some serious street smarts just to survive. And those aren't exactly skills you learn in a classroom, right? But they were essential for him to rise to power later on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something for all of us to consider, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you're stuck in a dead-end job,
Uh-huh.
but you're learning to be resourceful, to manage difficult personalities, to solve problems on the fly. These are valuable skills
Yeah.
that could be useful in a future role.
It's such a good reminder that, even if it doesn't feel like it,
Yeah.
we're always learning, we're always growing. And those experiences, even the tough ones, are shaping us into,
Right.
the people we're meant to become.
Into the person you're meant to be. Now, this is where the speaker introduces a really interesting idea.
Okay.
They argue that Joseph's hardships weren't just these random events.
Okay.
They were specific trials designed to mold his character and prepare him for his destiny.
That's a big statement. I can see how some people might find that comforting, while others might find it, kind of hard to accept, especially if they're going through something truly awful. It's almost like the speaker is saying that, suffering can be divinely ordained.
Yes, there is that element to it. And this is where understanding the concept of a covenant becomes really important. The speaker points out that Joseph's unwavering faith
Yeah.
was rooted in God's covenant with his ancestors.
Okay.
This sacred promise that was passed down through generations.
And for those who might not be super familiar with that term,
Sure.
what is a covenant in this context?
In simple terms, a covenant is a solemn agreement between God and his people.
Okay.
In the case of Joseph's ancestors,
Yeah.
God had promised to bless them and their descendants. Okay, so even though Joseph found himself in these incredibly difficult circumstances, he clung to the belief that God would ultimately fulfill his promise.
So it's like having this bedrock of faith.
Yes.
This unshakable belief that even if things look bleak right now, there's a greater force working things out in the long run.
That's a great way to put it. And it leads right into the next big point.
Yeah.
The source's argument that for believers,
Okay.
there is already a guarantee of a glorious future, specifically through Christ. They even pull in a passage
Right.
from Colossians 1:27, Christ in you, the hope of glory.
So it's about having that hope, that trust, even when your current reality feels anything but glorious. But it's not just a passive hope, is it?
No, not at all.
The speaker emphasizes that it's about actively believing
Yes,
in the promise of that better future.
exactly. And this is where the speaker really gets into the power of belief,
Okay.
arguing that even in seemingly impossible situations, faith can make a difference. And to illustrate this point, they share a pretty remarkable anecdote
Yes.
about a young man
I remember this.
who's facing serious legal trouble.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he's facing potential jail time. Things are looking pretty grim.
Yeah. And then...
He prays,
Uh,
he leans into his faith even though everything seems hopeless. And then,
yeah.
almost miraculously, the officer involved in his case retracts his statement,
Wow.
claiming it wasn't him after all. The charge is dropped, and the young man walks free.
That's an incredible story.
It really is.
And it really does speak to the power of believing in something beyond yourself,
Yeah.
even when the odds seem stacked against you. But I think it also raises some important questions.
Oh, for sure.
What about those whose prayers don't seem to be answered? What about the situations where there isn't this
Right.
seemingly miraculous
Yes.
turn of events?
That's a really crucial point,
Yeah.
and one that I'm sure a lot of people are grappling with right now.
Yeah.
You know, it's about exploring the nuances of faith,
Mm-hmm.
the complexities of belief in the face of real-world suffering.
Okay.
And that's precisely what the speaker tackles next. You know, you raised a really important point before about those whose prayers aren't answered in such a dramatic way.
Right.
And the speaker doesn't shy away from that at all.
Yeah.
In fact, they acknowledge that sometimes, even for those with strong faith, things don't go as planned.
Right. It's not always a Hollywood ending,
Right.
but the speaker argues that even those difficult,
Yeah.
seemingly negative experiences can work for good in the lives of believers.
They bring up Romans 8:28,
Okay.
which says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose.
Yeah.
It's a verse that offers a lot of comfort, but it can also be really challenging, especially when we're in the midst of pain or hardship.
Yeah. And I think it's really easy to kind of misinterpret that verse,
Yeah.
to think that it means that every bad thing that happens is somehow part of some grand design. And that can be kind of a dangerous
Way of thinking.
Absolutely. The speaker is very careful to clarify that this doesn't mean we should seek out suffering
Right.
or minimize the very real pain
Yeah.
that people experience. It's more about finding meaning and purpose even in the midst of those difficult circumstances.
So it's not about saying, oh, well, this terrible thing happened, but it's all part of God's plan.
Right.
But rather, how can I find strength and growth,
Yes,
even in this really difficult situation?
exactly. And they use Joseph's story to illustrate this point. Even though he went through years of betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment,
Right.
those experiences ultimately shaped him into the leader he needed to be to save countless lives during the famine.
Okay, so it's like saying, look, Joseph didn't choose to be betrayed by his brothers or sold into slavery.
Right.
But those experiences, as horrific as they were, they became part of his journey.
Right.
They became part of what shaped his character and prepared him for his destiny. Precisely. It's such a powerful message because it acknowledges that we don't always have control over the things that happen to us,
Yeah.
but we do have control over how we respond to those events.
And that's where the speaker's emphasis on faith comes back into play, right? It's about trusting that even when we don't understand why things are happening,
Yes.
there's a bigger picture unfolding.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's not about blind faith
Right.
or ignoring the very real struggles that people face. It's about cultivating a deep sense of trust that even in the darkest of times,
Yeah.
there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And I think that's what makes the story of Joseph so enduring. It's not just a fairy tale.
Right.
It's a story about resilience, about overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
Yes.
About finding hope when it seems like all hope is lost.
The speaker also highlights Joseph's unwavering commitment to his values,
Yes.
even when he was tempted to compromise them.
That's a great point because, I mean, when you think about it, Joseph had plenty of opportunities to become bitter, resentful, to give in to despair. But he didn't. He held on to his integrity, his belief in God, even when it would have been easier to just give up.
Absolutely. And that's such an important message for all of us.
Yeah.
It's about remembering who we are, what we stand for, even when life throws us these curveballs. It's about having the courage to hold on to our values, even when it's hard.
And the speaker also makes a connection between this idea of, holding on to your values and trusting in God's timing.
They bring up Psalm 25.3,
Okay.
which says, "No one who hopes in you will ever be put to shame, but shame will come on those who are treacherous without cause." And a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest act of faith is simply waiting, trusting that things will work out in their own time.
It's that letting go and letting God
Yeah.
concept, right? But that's so much easier said than done,
Oh, tell me about it.
especially in our fast-paced, instant gratification world.
It's incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
But the speaker argues that it's in those moments of surrender, of letting go of our need to control everything that we open ourselves up to, possibilities we might never have imagined.
So it's not about being passive or giving up.
No.
It's about actively choosing to trust
Yes.
in a power greater than ourselves, believing that even when we can't see it, something good is happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. And the speaker reminds us that this trust doesn't mean we won't face challenges or experience difficult emotions.
Right.
It's about finding a source of strength and hope that can carry us through those storms.
It's like building that internal foundation
Yeah.
that can withstand whatever life throws at you. But it's not just about weathering the storms, is it? It's about emerging from those experiences.
Right.
Transformed.
Yeah.
Stronger.
That's it.
More resilient. It feels like we've covered so much ground already.
Oh, yeah.
But I think what's really interesting is how the speaker brings it all together at the end and really applies these lessons from Joseph's life
Right.
directly to us, the listeners.
It's like, okay, you've heard the story, you've seen the principles in action. Now, how can you apply this to your own life?
Exactly. So let's dive into those takeaways. What are some of the key things that the speaker wants us to remember?
Well, first and foremost, it's that challenges are inevitable.
Yeah.
No one gets through life unscathed.
Right.
We're all going to face difficult seasons, moments where we feel lost, betrayed, or just plain stuck.
Yeah, it's like that saying, life is a roller coaster, you just gotta ride it.
Yeah.
But the speaker doesn't just leave us there
Yeah.
with this kind of bleak outlook. They offer a more empowering perspective.
They do. They suggest that instead of seeing these challenges as roadblocks,
Yeah,
we can choose to view them as opportunities for growth and transformation.
like Joseph's time as a slave. Right. It wasn't pleasant, but it was during those years that he developed the skills and the resilience that he needed to eventually thrive in a position of power.
Exactly. So the question becomes, what skills are you developing now, even if your current situation feels less than ideal?
Yeah.
What lessons are you learning that might be valuable later on?
So even if it doesn't feel like it, there's always something to be gained from every experience, even the difficult ones.
Even the tough ones.
But I think the speaker also acknowledges that, it's not always easy to see those silver linings,
For sure.
especially when you're in the thick of it.
Absolutely.
And that's where the second takeaway comes in, the importance of faith. And I think they're not just talking about, religious faith, but just a more general sense of belief in something bigger than yourself.
Right.
Whether it's, a higher power or the inherent goodness of humanity or even just the belief that things will eventually get better.
It's about trusting that there's a reason for the challenges you're facing, even if you can't see it right now.
Yeah. It's about holding on to that little sliver of hope, that belief that your current situation isn't your final destination.
Yeah, and I think that's where the story of Joseph is so powerful. The reminder that even when things look their bleakest, even when it seems like all is lost, there's still a chance for things to turn around.
Absolutely.
and for us to, emerge from those challenges stronger and more resilient than we ever thought possible.
And the Spiegel's final takeaway is all about identifying your own covenants.
Yes.
Those sources of strength and inspiration that, keep you grounded when life gets turbulent.
Right, because we all need something to hold on to when those storms hit.
For sure. Maybe it's your family or your friends, a deep connection to nature, or even just a favorite quote that reminds you of your own resilience.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is, having that anchor, that source of hope and inspiration can make all the difference.
It really can.
Well, this deep dive has been all about finding hope in the midst of hopeless situations. And I think the story of Joseph offers such a powerful reminder that even when things seem impossible, there's always a possibility for things to change, for us to emerge from those challenges, like you said.
Yeah.
Stronger and more resilient than we ever thought possible.
That's right. And as we wrap up, the speaker leaves us with a final question to ponder.
Okay.
What is one area of your life where you need to hold on to hope more firmly? Believing that your current situation is not your final destination.
So maybe it's a relationship that feels strained, or a dream that seems out of reach, or just a challenge that feels insurmountable.
Right.
Whatever it is, remember Joseph. Remember his resilience, his unwavering faith, and know that you too
Yes.
have the strength to overcome any obstacle.
We would love to hear your reflections on this deep dive. Maybe you've had your own Joseph moments, times when you persevered through trials and came out stronger on the other side.
Yeah.
Share your story, your insights, because you never know who might need to hear your message of hope today.